Calls it a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires. Swing and a drive. Deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matt Moreno. And look, we didn't know when this game was going to end, if this game was going to end, 4.5 hours or something after words. The Dodgers win. They get out of it in the 10th inning, and they sweep the Giants, which always feels good, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. I know at first we were looking at a pretty early start, all things considered, and then the game started dragging, and then, of course, extra innings, and then it looked like was 10 not even going to be enough. But, Justin Brill came in and shut the door, and the Dodgers get out of there with a sweep. And the 15 wins against the Giants are their most in their head-to-head in one season, are their most in their head-to-head matchups, I think, since moving to LA.
Love it. Yeah, there's nothing better than, sweeping the Giants. We could say, hey, do these games matter? Do they not? Look, if you can beat the Giants, then that's good news. We appreciate the folks joining us on our live show. As you know, we do one of these every Sunday night. The time has been fluctuating a bit. The plan was to do it earlier, almost as a post-game show. It ends up about 10 minutes earlier than our normal 9 p.m. schedule, so we appreciate folks joining us. I'm seeing that my audio is low in the chat. We'll get that one sorted out. Folks joining us in the comments, via podcast as well, we appreciate you. Let's get this bad boy plugged in. But we got a good show planned. Might have gotten it a little bit better. The microphones, these things are finicky. We appreciate folks joining us live. We appreciate folks joining us on the podcast. We're part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and so tonight's going to be a great show. We're going to talk Trea Turner and the updates on his free agency, some interesting quotes in an article that came out this week. We're going to talk injury updates. That feels like it's the most important segment, Matt, of our show every single week. Tony Gonsolin, Blake Treinen, Brusdar Graterol, Yency Almonte, David Price, all huge injury updates. Gavin Lux as well, making his return. We're going to talk a little bit about Gavin Lux and kind of how the Dodgers are going to handle him down the stretch. And then finally, we'll check in on some of those playoff roster battles. Trayce Thompson, Cody Bellinger, Chris Taylor, Joey Gallo in the outfield, some guys in the bullpen as well. And so that's the plan. We'll get to some questions from you all at the end of the night as well. So real quick, Dodgers, I like to start off with just a reminder, 101 wins. That's just under 70% of a win percentage. 697 is that. They're on pace for a tick under 113 games, Matt. The franchise record is 106. I don't want to reboot the is this the best team in Dodgers history conversation right now, but when you look at the Dodgers on pace for nearly 113 wins, that's an absurd number.
Yeah, definitely. And I know the last time we sort of broached this subject, I said that I would need to see how the postseason unfolds to declare them, whether this year is the best team that they've ever had. But honestly, I think if they go on to win 110 plus games, you may have to do it regardless of what sort of happens in the postseason. Because, if they were to finish with like 107 wins, obviously there's some argument there, right? But if you break it by 4 more, I think it's relatively clear at that point, especially when you look at all the injuries that they've had to overcome this year. Not that they haven't had those in the past, but I feel like it's been a lot more substantial to a bunch of key guys for long periods of time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, there's so much more to be determined. I think the best team conversation is one we do in hindsight rather than in the moment. But I think we can just pause and appreciate they have 101 wins now, which is an incredible number with 17 games to go. I think the all-time wins record, they'd have to go 15-2 over the last
17-1.
17-1. All right, there you go. 17-1 to break that one. So I don't think that's in play. I think the 106 is going to be fairly achievable. And so in many ways, it's sort of a good thing. They're just going to sit right in the middle. I love you update us on our magic numbers every single time. The magic number is now 1 to earn a bye and start the postseason in the NLDS. That's the most important thing. 7 for the number 1 seed in the National League and 11 for home field advantage through the World Series. Again, 17 games, and if you factor in 17 chances on your end, 17 chances on the other end, you can do the math and say that those are all pretty good, pretty likely numbers for the Dodgers to reach. And so we'll talk about how they handle that down the stretch. Let's talk real quick, Matt, while we're here, about what we just saw. The Dodgers sweep the Giants. They've now won 7 of their last 8. They win this one in the 10th inning. They blow the lead late. They come back and retake the lead in the 10th, and then Andre Jackson and Justin Brule, which gives you a sense of how much the Dodgers really cared about this one, are able to shut the door there at the end. Anything you take away from a game like the one we just saw tonight?
I mean, I guess the situational hitting, I think in general has been better over the past, I don't know, maybe week to 10 days or so. And we saw it in particular in the Giants series. So that was good to see. But for me, other than that, I'll go to Andrew Heaney. He snapped his streak of allowing a home run. So that ended at 5 straight starts. But he did extend his streak of at least 6 strikeouts, which he's now done in 6 consecutive outings, which is a positive. So it was good to see, kind of early season Heaney where the strikeout numbers are still there. He's not giving up home runs. But yeah, and then, I mean, kind of lighthearted stuff. Honestly, I felt like once it was pouring. I don't know how, I didn't know how they were going to get this game. And I felt like, hey, just play 5 innings and whoever's winning at that point, call it. Even if it's a loss for the Dodgers. And like you said, Andre Jackson and Justin Brule pitching in the 10th, this game didn't really, I don't want to say didn't mean anything to them, but it pretty much didn't mean anything to them.
Yeah, I'll say it didn't mean anything to them. They wanted to get certain guys in, Phillips and Kimbrel, those types, Vesia. They wanted to get them in. I mean, Vesia, look, I said as I was watching along, Vesia comes in, he walks the first 2 guys, then Jock Peterson bails him out by trying to bunt on an 0-2 count, which was a beautiful thing. And then all of a sudden you've got a string of righties, and that's normally the spot where somebody comes in and takes Vesia's spot. And I posted, I said, this is why. This tells you how much the Dodgers care. Vesia is being left in to face this string of righties just so that they can see what happens in this spot. And guess what? It wasn't great what happened with righties in that. Vesia ends up blowing it. Kimbrel comes in. Again, normally if you care about this, if you're the road team, you would save your closer for the bottom of the inning just because you know that if you do get a lead in the top half, then Kimbrel can come in the bottom. They're not interested in that. He's warmed up, throw him in the 9th. This was just simply a scheduled appearance. It sure seemed like. And then when they take a 2-run lead into the 10th, it's Andre Jackson, who is, I don't know if it's even arguable, the worst pitcher that they have in their bullpen, the guy they trust the least, maybe if you want to put it a little more politically correct. Justin Brule comes in to relieve Andre Jackson. He's probably in that same conversation. Those are guys that haven't spent a ton of time in the major leagues. And so I think you're right. I don't think this is a game that the Dodgers spent all that much time worrying about. And yet they go out and win it. And take care of business against the Giants. Mookie Betts with the big double, 3 straight walks, bring in the second run. And so all in all, a pretty solid one for the Dodgers there. I mean, anything else from this game jump out to you or this series? Oh, one thing I was going to say, I meant to say this. You mentioned Heaney breaking the streak of home runs allowed. Here's a streak he continued. The over on his strikeouts total hits every freaking time. I got scared off today because it was 6.5 with -130 on the over. Shouldn't have been scared, Matt. 4 innings, 8 strikeouts. The guy is a machine. Pound the over on Heaney strikeouts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's been consistent there, and I know that's a tough over/under. I don't necessarily blame you for backing off on that one. I mean, I guess another thing, if you want to look at, Justin Turner continues to hit well.
Yeah.
I mean, Freddie Freeman, obviously. We could go up and down the lineup, really. I see somebody commenting about defense. Trea Turner's throw led to an unearned run, and I think some of that. I'm jumping around. Sorry, Trea Turner's throw. Some of it, I think, which Hanser Alberto alluded to, which is what sidetracked me, was potentially just the wet ball in the infield and the dirt. And I mean, not to make an excuse, but hopefully it was more that than maybe needing to be seriously concerned about his defense. But I think maybe there was a big win for you because the in-game interviews were relatively entertaining again tonight.
There you go. Is it a win? It feels like it's just obvious to everybody except for you at this point, Matt. But
Perhaps.
There we go. Let's get into some of the topics for the show. And I think sort of maybe the headline that came out of this past week or so as it relates to the Dodgers, given where they are in the standings, is Trea Turner. There's an article in the OC Register in which there were some comments about his interest in staying on the West Coast versus going to the East Coast, his interest in, and sort of where those comments stemmed from, all of that sort of thing. And so I'll start with just the piece itself and the quotes, and then we can talk about Trea Turner and the future. But what did you make of that article? Was there anything surprising to you in it?
Not too much. I mean, I think it was a lot of what we sort of felt and sensed, and had kind of been reported early on, was that, contract talks extension talks during spring training didn't necessarily get anywhere. And once the season started, Trea was pretty open about just wanting to focus on that. I think it was nice to sort of see him offer some clarity that, he's not dead set on going back to the East Coast, because that narrative and perception, whatever you want to call it, never came from him. Like
he did say in that article that he did say that, and I don't remember the exact origin, but he basically said when he knew he was going to get traded, he wanted to put out the idea that he wanted to stay on the East Coast.
That's right.
And the reason was only because that was the area of the country he knew best. And so he said, if I'm going to get traded, I know I'm going to get a massive contract extension offered to me. And so I would much rather try and make that decision in an area that I already know something about. But what he did in this article was he sort of backtracked and said, look, I was just putting that out there because I was going to get traded and I had never been to the West Coast and lived on the West Coast, that kind of a thing. And so to your point, I think we see where it came from, but he also put it to rest and sort of proved that that narrative maybe didn't have much basis in it.
Right. That's fair. And that's important to note. I guess it was more from the standpoint of, hey, like you just said, and like Trey did explain in that article, if I'm getting traded, like I do want to stay on the East Coast, but and somehow that like morphed into like he never wants to be on the West Coast at all type thing.
Yeah.
So I think it was good for him to offer clarity, like I said, and express a willingness to, of course he would love to stay with the Dodgers. I think he did also mention, and the article we're referencing is from Bill Plunkett on the OC Register, if you guys want to go read it. The one thing that he is still sort of needing to get settled in, which he hasn't necessarily done yet, is with a home, which is understandable, right? Like you're not going to make a significant purchase like that if you're potentially, done there after this season. But hopefully the Dodgers will re-sign him and Trey will get to find a little bit more security in terms of a house.
Yeah, and look, this could all be posturing because if you are going to be a free agent, you definitely want to make clear to the Dodgers that you're interested. I don't think he needs to go to Bill Plunkett of the Orange County Register to make sure Andrew Friedman knows he's open to it. But real quick, and we've got a video up on our YouTube page, so if you're not subscribed and ring the notification bell there already, do that. We post a bunch of content throughout the week, whether it's game previews every single morning where I hand out flaming hot betting picks, Matt. We have hit 1 out of 2 of our bets or better in, I believe, 15 consecutive shows. So, I mean, tell me where you're going to find success like that, okay? But we also post content as it comes, such as a Trea Turner video that Daniel Starkin and I did. But you and I haven't gotten a chance to talk about it. Many of the folks in here, we can interact with this real time. But I think here's the key points when it comes to Trea Turner. I'll talk about the money, I'll talk about the stats, and I'll talk about the alternatives. The money is simple. The Dodgers this year, their total payroll obligation total somewhere in the ballpark of about $265 million, okay? They've got $103 million coming off of the books in the forms of David Price, Trea Turner, Clayton Kershaw, Craig Kimbrel, Andrew Heaney, and Tyler Anderson. Joey Gallo's got a pretty big number in there. He's coming off, but I'm not sure that counts considering when he joined the team. You've got a $16 million team option for Justin Turner that they could pick up or decline. Trevor Bauer's got $35.3 million that they are not expected to owe unless his appeal is successful. You've got guys like Daniel Hudson and Danny Duffy, who both have team options that are fairly large. I would imagine neither of those gets picked up. And so basically when it all boils down to, right now the Dodgers only have $87 million committed in 2023. That's to Mookie, Freddie, Chris Taylor, Max Muncy, Blake Treinen, and everybody's favorite backup catcher, Austin Barnes. So $87 million total. That doesn't include arbitration guys like Bellinger, Urias, Buehler, May, Smith, Ferguson, Gonsolin, Graterol, Almonte, and Trace Thompson. So the point is the Dodgers have a bunch of money, okay? The point you also need to acknowledge in there, the Dodgers have a bunch of needs. They've got like 3 starting pitchers you trust under contract next year. They've got 3 of their 5 or 6 best starters all due for free agency this year. So they have a ton of money, but they also have some needs at starting pitching. And at shortstop. Alternatively, Trea Turner's a free agent, Dansby Swanson also a free agent, Xander Bogaerts expected to be a free agent if he opts out, and Carlos Correa as well. Statistically, Trey Turner, gosh, Trace and Trey are going to I should say drive me crazy. They probably drive our listeners crazy even more because I screw them up all the time. Trey Turner, number 10 in wins above replacement. He's in the top 10 in wins above replacement, batting average, hits, stolen bases, and RBI. He's around 19th in slugging percentage, 31st in on base, 20 home runs on the season average defense. Those are the numbers. When I talk about the alternatives, he's 10th in WAR, Swanson is 9th, Bogaerts is 8th, Correa, as we know, very good, but also a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. So all of that comes into, they've got the money, they also have other needs. He's been very good, if not better than maybe we even expected him to be this year. I'll speak for myself. And yet, there are other guys out there. So the question I've got on the screen, Matt, for those listening on podcast, is he the Dodgers' top priority this offseason?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I'll say no, just because the state of their pitching is in so much flux. If Walker Buehler wasn't lost, presumably for all of last year, I know he himself said he doesn't want to fully shut the door on 2023.
I'll shut it for him. I'll shut it for him. Walker, you're sitting out 2023.
Considering the state of the pitching, I think that needs to be their top priority, but it's close. I mean, it's 1A and 1B, and I think a lot of what Trey does is, one, he's at a position where, like we've discussed in the past, the Dodgers don't really have a clear-cut replacement if he's not re-signed. You know, you maybe could move Gavin Lux there, but I don't know of many people that would be too comfortable with that. Maybe Chris Taylor, but even then, like seeing him do it for a full year at that position, we don't know what that would look like. And I don't know if the Dodgers want to do something like that. I think one thing they really value with him is his versatility. Prospects, Jacob Amaya, like not quite ready yet. So there isn't necessarily a clear-cut answer. It could be filled in free agency with several of the other options that you named, who are also very good players. But I think Trey definitely warrants, making a significant push to re-sign. And he just brings, a very different dynamic to the team that they haven't really had. Mookie Betts obviously has the speed to steal bases as well, but not quite the same as Trey. And it's kind of the intangibles. And we've discussed this at different times, and my only hesitation would just be, the years of what kind of a big contract for him would need to be.
Yeah, THP in the comments is talking about Trea Turner's defense. I'm curious where you stand on this. I would say he's been average defensively, which is pretty much a slightly better than I expected. I mean, I don't think he's a drop-off defensively from Corey Seager. Not that that's saying a ton. Like, I don't think Trea Turner's a guy that's going to win you a Gold Glove. But I would say, and even Daniel on our show earlier in the week kind of pointed out, he started off pretty poor. Obviously, as you said, tough moment tonight. But I would say for the most part, he's been an average, shortstop. And I'm sure somebody could give me a UZR, defensive run saved. And I think defensive metrics are helpful to some degree, but also probably the least reliable of all of the, maybe outside of pitcher war or something like that. But what have you thought about him defensively? I mean, just if we're talking on the basis of, do you feel good defensively if Trea Turner is your shortstop for the next, let's say, 5 to 6 years? I'm not saying it's a 5 or 6 year contract, but I'm just saying if he has to play shortstop for the next 5 to 6 years, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think it would be fine. I mean, maybe by the 4th or 5th year, you might see some drop off, but overall, yes, it was a little bit of a shaky start, and I think there was some reason to be concerned, but generally speaking, I think he's fine. I think he's average with the potential to make impressive plays, which we have seen, whether it's a strong throw from deep in the hole or chasing down that pop-up in foul territory where he did his slides that typically you only see when, he's sliding into home plate or something. But he's fine. I mean, he's fine. And I think if he were to be around, long-term, the Dodgers would continue to dig into positioning stuff and maybe make some minor adjustments there that could end up proving to be a significant difference for him.
Yeah, and then let's flip to the offensive side. I mean, again, THP also pointing out, THP clearly not a Trea Turner fan, it appears, but saying that he's overperforming this year. I mean, I find that hard to believe. He's at 5.8 wins above replacement this year. He was a full win above replacement better last year. If you go back to 2020, obviously only 60 games, but he would have been on pace for right around 5.5 or 6 wins that season as well, 4.2, 4.9 before that. And so this is kind of the player that he is. Obviously, you could look at some of the underlying metrics, and I know some are better than others. I mean, when we did the show, we talked about he's got some numbers that are in the upper echelons and well above average, and then he's got like a chase rate and a whiff rate that are below average. So offensively, I mean, I said it, top 10 in wins above replacement, batting average, hits, stolen bases, RBIs, 19th in slugging percentage, 31st in on-base percentage, 20 home runs. He's a guy who's, 29 years old, I believe, at this point. And so I don't see it's not like, he's got 20 home runs, that's going to be a career high. I think he's probably going to hang around the 20 neighborhood for the next 4 or 5 seasons. I've expressed concern about the batting average as the speed starts to go. But again, I look at a guy like Trea Turner, I don't see him becoming unplayably slow in the next 5 or 6 years either. Obviously, RBIs, a number that, I'm not that interested in. Stolen bases, even, we'll see with the maybe the new pitching rules next year. Maybe Trea Turner becomes more of a weapon. I don't know. But overall, I think Trea Turner is very, very good. He's one of the best players in all of baseball right now. And so let's talk financials. Looking at the contracts handed out to shortstops last year, You've got Carlos Correa, who had just turned 27, probably the most surprising contract. He was given just 3 years and $105 million with the opt. And the reason he signed it was basically because he can opt out again this year in search of a long-term contract, which many people expect him to do. And I would say Carlos Correa, historically, probably as close in this class as you're going to get to Trea Turner. I would say Trea Turner is the best of this group of 4 guys, but historical performance, Correa and Turner, I would say, are at the top. You got Trevor Story. He's a lesser player. He was 28 years old. He got 6 years, $140 million. And then, of course, you've got Corey Seager, $325 million over 10 years. He was a 27-year-old, so 2 years younger than Trea Turner. Again, Swanson, Bogaerts, and Correa, the competition. Let me ask you this number. So Corey Seager got $32.5 million through his age, 36-year-old season. If you gave that same dollar amount per year and through the same age, for Trea Turner, you're looking at 8 years and $260 million. That's 8 years at $32.5 million. Takes you through the same age of the Corey Seager contract. I feel better about Trea Turner's health than I felt about Corey Seager's health. I think some of Trea's skills are more likely to diminish than Corey Seager's skills are, although the health sort of counterbalances that. I would say they're about a push defensively. Maybe Trea Turner has a slightly better chance of sticking long-term at shortstop, if you like him there as well. So 8 years, 260 as just a starting point. How do we feel?
I would do it with some reservations of what that would look like maybe in years 6, 7, 8. But at that point, you would hope that the first 5 were, spectacular and kind of what we've seen. And if you are, have one World Series, potentially 2, then, hey, it ends up being, a great deal. I think the Dodgers would prefer doing a fewer years at a higher AAV. I think he definitely will look to break Seager's.
Would you do 5 years, $200 million?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's easy to say because it's not my money, right? It's all, but absolutely. Like, I think that's kind of, maybe the best middle ground for both parties. But who knows? I mean, Trea could be looking he may want the long-term deal as well as,
I'm sure,
more of the money. But, the 5 years would potentially leave him in position to sign another relatively lucrative contract compared to if you do an 8-year deal now. By the time you get to the end of that, you're more or less at the end of your career. Like, there's not going to be another deal, waiting in the pipeline for you.
Yeah, I'm curious, folks in the chat. 5 years, $200 million, so shorter term but much higher average annual value. That puts you at $40 million a year for the non-math majors in the room, versus 8 years, $260 million as sort of a longer-term deal. Obviously, you're basically saying we want those last 3 years at $20 million a year because we think, the salary cap goes up, and excuse me, there is no salary cap in baseball. How dare I say that out loud? The luxury tax threshold goes up, and that kind of a thing. And so 5 years, 200 million, 8 years, 260. I'm curious which people prefer of those two, but look, I've been all over the place on Trea Turner. The speed thing really scares me. I'll be honest. Again, I think we've got as much science and technology and nutrition information now as we've ever had. And so maybe I feel a little bit better about how guys are going to age. Again, I look at Trea Turner. I think the hit tool and just his ability to put bat to ball and to place the ball and hit for average, I think that's going to be okay. Now, does that drop from a 310 average to a 285 average? Maybe, because then if you've got a shortstop who's 285 with 18 home runs and above average but not elite speed, I don't know, but I'll be interested. I mean, I guess this is where I'll land, because this is where I landed with Daniel, is the Dodgers need a shortstop. And so if you're not going to sign Trea Turner, we both agree Gavin Lux at shortstop, not an option. He fits in at second base, great. Jacob Amaya is the only other guy on the 40-man roster that you could maybe even pretend to argue has a chance, and he has struggled, or I should say been up and down, let's say offensively. Nobody expects him to offensively be a threat at the major league level, even if he can play some defense there. And so if it's not Trea Turner, are you going to go give Dansby Swanson, who has way less of a track record, a big deal? Are you going to give Xander Bogaerts a big deal? Are you going to give Carlos Correa? No, we're not going to give Carlos Correa the big deal. So, if I had to choose between Swanson, Bogaerts, and Trea Turner, I'm picking Trea Turner, and if I have to pay slightly more, $3 to $5 million more a year to get the guy that I want versus the other two, who I've seen in my jersey, who I've seen in my clubhouse, who I've seen hit in those moments, I think that's where I land. And so that's sort of the bottom line for me, with one small asterisk, which is he has to perform in the postseason.
Yeah, and that's where that last point that you made was what I was going to bring up too. All of this is a moot point for as much as I think re-signing Trey is a pretty significant priority. It's all a moot point if he puts together another postseason that mirrors what we saw in 2021. Because at this point, that's not something the Dodgers can afford, right? They need their star players to perform in the playoffs because that's what this team is playing for. And I know, like, I don't want to take for granted that they're going to be back in the postseason next year and competing for a World Series, but there obviously has been an expectation that's been set in the front office, and the team and the players, they all embrace that. And so considering that to be the case, you don't need Trea Turner on your team next year to win 100+ games again and then sort of flame out in the playoffs. So if he struggles again in the postseason, depending on how it looks, if it's just bad luck, he's hitting balls right at guys and can't necessarily do anything about it, then okay. But if there are a lot of strikeouts, a lot of weak contact, then honestly, I don't know how much of a push the Dodgers would make to re-sign him.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And that's what makes this conversation interesting today. And yet also, like you said, irrelevant. Because if it's a 150 batting average in the postseason, tough luck. But if he turns it around like Seager, people forget Seager struggled in the postseason until that 2020 season, and then everything shifted. And so if Trea Turner can be himself in the postseason and carry that over, then I think there's going to be a huge push. I mean, that's a guy with tens of millions of dollars on the line come postseason time and his performance in Trea Turner. So just real quick, Michael says 7 years, $320 million. So there you go. He's ready to give, maybe he means 220. I mean, maybe he wants to give him $50 million. I was like 8 for 260. He's like, no, 7 for 320. We've got 7 for 245. That's Derek with that one. So again, you shave 1 year, $15 million. The 8,260 again was just based off basically the last 8 years of the Seager contract because it gets them to roughly the same age. So there we go. All right, let's get to the part that maybe is the most relevant to where we're at now, Matt, and where you become the expert in the room and I shut up and just start to listen. Let's talk injury updates. We'll start with what I believe is the most important name on this list, and that's Tony Gonsolin. Where are we at with Tony Gonsolin? Give me a level of confidence about his potential to contribute in the postseason.
I mean, potential to contribute, I would set at about a 7, but I don't think it's going to be, as a full starter's workload. And I know we discussed this in one of our videos that's now up on YouTube. Gonsolin did throw another bullpen session over the weekend, and he's supposed to do it again Monday at Dodger Stadium. After that, if he continues to kind of progress and keep going well, he'll then face batters. But Dave Roberts has been pretty consistent now in the past week or so, 3 to 5 days, call it that Gonsolin probably won't be fully built up for as a normal pitcher would come the postseason. And so, like we talked about, I think we're looking at a scenario where he's probably an opener. I mean, in theory, they could move him to the bullpen, and maybe they do have an actual opener who pitches 1 inning before him, and then Gonsolin were to come in instead of just getting maybe 3 or 4 right off the bat with him. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see kind of how that gets pieced together, because one thing that seems to be pretty clear is that he won't be back throwing, 5-6 innings.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier in the week. It's just interesting, the dilemma I think the Dodgers will have, because if you choose to use him solely as a reliever in the NLDS, I wonder if that jeopardizes your ability to have him stretched out to be a starter in the NLCS. Now, if he is an opener, that's one thing. But obviously, if he's struggling in the first inning, he's not going to be able to get his pitches in. Now, could he go in and throw the rest of it in the bullpen or in a simulated game or something? Like, I suppose. But they might have to decide between, do we put all our eggs in the basket of having him built up to be a starter in the NLCS, or because we've got a little bit of depth at starting pitching, because we've got Anderson and Heaney on the back half, do we say, look, we actually don't need him as a starter. We'll take our chances with Anderson and or Heaney in that number 4 or 5 spot. Let's just get what we can out of Gonsolin as an opener, as a reliever. I mean, when we talk reliever, like, I don't think you or I are, either of us is thinking of him as like a high leverage reliever, right?
Right. I think it would be, you see him come in the second or third inning to then hopefully eat up 2 or 3 innings at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because look, he has some experience as a reliever, as people in the comments are saying. It's not good experience. I mean, he's made I believe it's 5 relief appearances in the postseason in 2020 and 2021. He's got a 10.5 ERA. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe in the regular season, he has some relief experience, and the ERA is 4, maybe even 5. And so, look, he's obviously having the best season of his career. So if you want to tell me none of that matters because this is a new Gonsolin, fine. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. But the evidence we do have of him as a relief pitcher is across the board worse as him as a starter. Like, you could say, well, this is a better version. Okay, well, 2020 Gonsolin was better as a starter. 2021 Gonsolin was better as a starter. And so it leads me to believe 2022 Gonsolin will also be better as a starter. But as good as he's been as a starter, even if he's worse as a reliever, that still could be an incredibly valuable piece. All right, right behind Gonsolin, we've got Blake Treinen. We know this is not related to the original injury. This is sort of just a arm fatigue type thing after coming back from injury. Where are we at with Blake Treinen, who is arguably the Dodgers' best relief pitcher if he's healthy?
Yeah, so I know there was, pretty significant concern when he went back on the IL with more, right shoulder soreness. I think the natural suspicion and belief was that it was related to the torn capsule that he dealt with earlier in the year. He said that wasn't the case, and frankly, everything since then has supported that because he's recovered he's recovered well. The soreness is started to go away, and so now on Monday, Treinen and Brusdar Graterol are probably going to be facing batters in a simulated game at Dodger Stadium, which is encouraging for both of them. And if they come out of that well, then they would then be activated by the end of the week during the homestand. Yeah.
Well, that's good news. So, I mean, look, there's still anytime with this, it's like, look, these 2 or 3 things need to happen. And then, and we spend so much time focusing on the and then piece of it. But let's remember, there's still a couple steps that have to go right before then. So, okay, Brusdar Graterol, where are we at with Graterol?
Yeah, so Graterol, he'll be facing batters too with Treinen.
Got it, I'm sorry.
They'll probably, that's fine. They'll probably be facing the same hitters and kind of same thing. Like, that should go well. If it does go well, then at some point, I don't know, Dave Roberts didn't say if it's like a Thursday or Friday type thing, but just on the homestand, he should be activated as well.
How much would you have to get paid to be a hitter against Graterol and Treinen? They're like, hey, Matt, we need somebody to stand in the batter's box against Treinen and Graterol. What's your dollar number where you start thinking about it?
Oh, man. I'm
going to be honest, it's probably 6 figures for me. Yeah, I don't think 5 figures gets me in against 102 and a guy who's building himself back up from injury.
Yeah, I think probably around there. But also, I mean, it's not like I'd have to get a hit, right? So if I just have to stand
there. No,
you
just have to stand there. But I'm saying, like, do you trust your reflexes? If Graterol lets one slip and it's 102, like, I don't think I have the reflexes to even get out of the way.
I would just stand, like, far back off the plate.
No. You need to be in. They needed a simulated hitter. They need you in the box, reasonably close to the plate. And you got to face them both.
That's tough. Yeah, that's tough. I don't know. Like you said, I think that neighborhood would need to. I'd start.
I'm probably bringing my mortgage with me and saying, "Here's the number that's left on the mortgage. If we take care of this, I'll stand in against these 2 and hope for the best."
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. I'm sorry if you already mentioned this one. Almonte. That felt like the biggest, most positive news we got today was Almonte, a guy who at one point was one of the top 3 pitchers the Dodgers had in the bullpen. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, so he's ahead of Graterol and Treinen because he's faced batters twice now over the past week, and next for him is going out on a rehab assignment with OKC. I believe that's going to be starting Tuesday. Dave Roberts said he should need to make probably at least 2 appearances for them. My guess is it may end up being more because they do, although I need to look at OKC's schedule and playoff scenarios and all that. The Dodgers do prefer kind of a final checkpoint for their high leverage relief pitchers to be a back-to-back scenario, and I don't think they would throw Almonte into that right off the bat. I think they would let him make his first appearance, take a night of rest, and then maybe come back with a back-to-back after that point. But I would peg his return at happening probably within the next 10 days or so.
Okay. Well, in 17 games left in the season, 17 games in 17 days, there's 1 day off with a doubleheader mixed in there as well. And so the next 10 days gives you the opportunity to get a couple appearances. And then reminder, if the Dodgers do clinch a bye in the first round, which, as we said, is the most likely scenario, that would give them another, I think it's 5 or 6 days after the regular season ends to build up. So if you get in 7 days before the regular season, that's almost a full 2 weeks, where if you're a reliever, that's plenty of time. Even if you're a starter, that's 1 or 2 simulated starts as well. Okay, we got one more name on this list. I threw it in the chat, but if you've got any questions, start posting those in the chat. We're going to get to those. Instead of saving those till the end where sometimes we run out of time, we're going to get to those now before we talk Lux playoff stuff, which we can get to if people want to. But David Price, a couple pieces to this update. I have long argued that he wasn't actually injured. I think I need to back off of that because it's now been a while. Do I need to back off of that? Is he really injured, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. I think your suspicions led you astray this time.
It's all right. Nobody's perfect. I'm definitely not.
Yeah. So Price is still recovering. I guess we can get into also the report that came out on him on Sunday. Before we get there,
both reports, the first report and then the alternate report.
Yeah. So he's behind Treinen and Gonsolin. So Treinen and Graterol. So he's not ready to face batters just yet. Dave Roberts, I think, described him as being like a tick behind those guys. And so he probably won't be throwing until later in the week. And then, they'll kind of reevaluate and see where things stand at that point. And now we can kind of get into, it was reported by, Bob Nightingale.
Everybody's favorite flawless baseball reporter, Bob Nightingale.
That David Price told him that he would be retiring after this season, which when I saw it, I thought, okay, like it makes sense.
Yeah, it wasn't sources. It was like quoted from Price.
Right. And I thought it made sense. It was something that Price touched on earlier in the year. And he said that he, would kind of leave it up to his kids and that he does ask them like, hey, do you want me to be home more often? And he'd said it's just something he'll worry about at the end of the season. And so when this came out, I thought, okay, obviously an older pitcher in the final year of his contract made sense. Right. And then reporters got into the clubhouse this Sunday afternoon and were able to ask him, and Price said, I haven't made a decision yet. And the conclusion I came to was perhaps this conversation with Nightingale was interpreted by Price as being off the record. And maybe he said, I'm going to retire. And Nightingale ran with that because there is a direct, like you said, there's a direct quote from Price that, everything hurts and I am going to retire. That's the only thing, because otherwise, like, I know Nightingale, like he's gotten crushed on Twitter for stuff in the past, but like something like this, I don't see how you mess up or get wrong.
Yeah, it's super bizarre, and maybe it's like there's some posturing. Maybe the agent came out and was like, hey, let's not close the door yet. Like let's leave our options open and make sure teams are still calling us just in case we do get the itch. But just bizarre. I mean, I don't think it affects the Dodgers. He's obviously a free agent at the end of the year, and I can't imagine the Dodgers would make him an offer that is anything more than like a veteran's minimum, even though he's been really solid. I mean, there was points when I thought he was a guy that was going to be on the postseason roster. I think he's going to be once again sort of edged out of that one based on just a numbers game, but there you go. Yeah, so a tick behind Treinen and Graterol there for David Price. And so, look, all those guys. So here's what I'm hearing. Gonsolin, Treinen, Graterol, and Price, all four of those guys expected back before the postseason, but how much time they have to be built up, very up in the air. Is that a fair assessment of those four?
I think that's fair, but also for Graterol and Treinen and even Price to a certain extent, the build-up time isn't really of much concern because they're probably not getting more than 4 or 5 outs at the most per appearance anyway. So if they were quote unquote built up for like one inning coming back, I think the biggest concern would just be making sure they could pitch on back-to-back nights, especially like we said, if the Dodgers advance to the NLCS without the travel days and the off days this year, that will become more imperative. But yeah, I mean, they should have plenty of time to sort of, get back and kind of get their feet under them again.
Okay, there we go. If those guys make the postseason roster, because some of those guys, as we'll talk about a bit later, might not. Okay, let's get to some questions, folks that are here live in the chat. Again, we do this every Sunday night around 9 p.m. Tonight was a night game. That's why we tried to piggyback it. We ended up around 8:50. So here we go. But if you've got questions, throw those in the chat. If you're joining us again via podcast, we very much appreciate you. You can always find me on Twitter at Jeff Spiegel, Matt at M Moreno 1015. So feel free to throw us comments in there. You can always send messages to at DodgerBlue1958 on social media as well. If you know you can't be in here for the live show, but want to get some questions answered. We've got some good ones in here. Again, some of this stuff that we're going to get to in a little bit. let's get to this one, Tom. One of the first questions. Tyler Anderson, due to be a free agent, do you think he gets a qualifying offer at the end of the year? And would you be interested in signing him to a multi-year deal? Congrats to Tyler Anderson, by the way. Had a kid. Also, congrats to him on the huge Oregon victory over BYU yesterday, at which I was in attendance. But more importantly, qualifying offer, multi-year deal, Tyler Anderson. We talked about the pitching, right? You've got Gonsolin, May, and Urias, the only three guys under contract. Pepio, Grove as well. But where are you at on Tyler Anderson?
Yeah, I think he definitely gets the qualifying offer just because at worst case scenario, the Dodgers end up getting a draft pick from there.
Yeah, or a 1 year deal for a guy that plugs the Bueller hole for 12 months.
Right. In terms of a multi-year contract, I think it's definitely going to. He's pitched his way into that type of deal. I think my preference would be a 2-year contract, but it probably will take 3 years to get it done just because he's sustained. Early in the season, we were saying, hey, is this Tyler Anderson for real? Is it going to hold up? He ended up being an all-star and has still continued to pitch well in the second half. So give him a ton of credit for doing that. I think he's definitely put himself in position to get a 3-year contract. Whether that ends up being from the Dodgers or not, obviously, is tough to say because you could get into a situation where maybe a team comes in and feels they want to overpay for him, and the Dodgers may decide, well, we have Pepio, we have all these other pitching prospects that will just, sort of let kind of take that role.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who's going to, turns 33 in December. You look at sort of his career stuff, not a guy who's made a ton of money in his career. Obviously signs an $8 million deal, so we're talking relative numbers. I'm with you. The qualifying offer is an absolute no-brainer. I mean, you look at the list of guys who are going to be free agents. I think Trea Turner is definitely getting a qualifying offer. I would say Anderson is as well. I don't think they've ever given Clayton Kershaw one. They have refused to do that out of respect for him, I think, in the past, so I would imagine they wouldn't do that. But I would say Anderson and Trea definitely get qualifying offers. I think Heaney's an interesting one based on how he pitches because, again, 1 year's $15 million or whatever the qualifying offer ends up being. Maybe it's $16 million. For a starting pitcher, I mean, it's double what you paid for him last year, but it's not the end of the world to not have a long-term contract there. But I'm with you. I think Anderson has proven to be effective. I think if you're Anderson or Heaney, wouldn't you want to play the next 2 or 3 seasons as a Dodger, the team that has clearly unlocked something in you that can get you back on track? And so 3 years, $40 million, something like that in the 13-ish $million range, I'd be more than comfortable with. You can never have enough starters. Anderson has proven to be effective. You definitely need a starter for next year. And look, if he continues to pitch and you need to move that contract, that wouldn't be a terrible contract to try and move for a guy who's been effective. So we spent a lot of time on that, but I think we both are resounding yes, he gets a qualifying offer. And yes, you try signing him to a multi-year deal while he's out there. Jason, with no runner on second for extra innings, does that increase your confidence in Kimbrel making the postseason roster? There's another question in here that we can combine from Tlalok. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Are we trusting Kimbrel to close in the playoffs? Where are we at on Kimbrel? This is a guy who is incredibly effective. Had a rough night Wednesday night. He allows 3 runs. One of those was an inherited runner, walk, and a home run. Perfect tonight. Where are you at on Kimbrel, the playoff roster, as a closer, etc.?
Yeah, I was never fully on board with the idea that he wouldn't make the postseason roster. I guess, like I said, short of him collapsing over the final month of the regular season, I thought that he would make it. And I think the kind of run that he went on, even with, like you said, the hiccup included, has secured his spot on the playoff roster. In terms of trust, I mean, I think I posed that question to you guys in one of our watch parties a few days ago. When he even looking at him pitching well, how much trust do you have in him? Ninth inning with a 1-run lead. I still don't necessarily know. It's tough, but I mean, yeah, I think it's safe to say he'll be on the roster.
Definitely will be on the playoff roster. I'm really fascinated to see how they handle the closer situation, because you would think if they were going to move off of him in the closer role that they would have done so already. But Evan Phillips comes in the 7th inning, it feels like, or the 8th inning every single time. They haven't experimented with that. And so I'm not saying he's going to be the closer. There's still 17 days remaining. I think you've probably got another 7 to 10 days that you can sort of toy around with before you need to set things up. And who knows, maybe the Dodgers don't think they have to decide that ahead of time. Maybe they think they could just get to the postseason, and the first time Evan Phillips is your official closer is in the postseason, or maybe it's Blake Treinen or Maybe it's Alex Vesia if there's a run of lefties, which people won't want to hear on Sunday after tonight's game. But I think he's definitely making the postseason roster. I would still say his closer role is very, very much up in the air. Stars wants to know, who would you rather see? Would you rather see the Brewers or the Padres in the postseason? I'll answer this one. It's very easy for me. I would much rather see the Brewers for two reasons. One is it's like the Giants in the sense that if you were to somehow lose to the Padres, it would be the most insufferable thing in the world. And so I find it to be there's no upside to playing the Padres. Like if you beat them, you're expected to beat them. And if you lose, then we have to hear Slam Diego for the next 12 months. So give me the Brewers every day of the week.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you interpret this question. So who would I rather see make the postseason? I think the Brewers, because the Padres not making the playoffs would be funny.
Yeah.
But if you're asking from a matchup perspective for the Dodgers specifically, I'll play the high stakes poker, which is ironic because I'm not like a gambler at all. But give me the Padres because I think that would be entertaining for bragging rights purposes.
Okay, Marco asks about the playoff starting outfielders. So let's just get into this now. One of my questions that I had left in here was sort of checking in on where we're at. This is a debate that we will be every 7 to 10 days. We're going to be checking in. So as we know, Mookie Betts is in right field. You've got Trayce Thompson, Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger, and Joey Gallo battling for the other two spots. Just looking at the last couple of weeks, Matt, it looks a lot like the regular season in which Trayce Thompson has been fantastic coming into tonight's game where he was 0 for 4 with a walk and 2 strikeouts, to be fair. As you'll see, that was better than the other guys tonight, but he has a 133 weighted runs created plus, 100 is league average. He's 33% better, and an 875 OPS. That's over the last 2 weeks. So just like checking in on, has the tide been turning for any of these guys? Chris Taylor, 0 for 4 tonight with 3 strikeouts. His weighted runs created plus over the last 2 weeks, 92. Joey Gallo, 67. Cody Bellinger, who was 0 for 4 at the strikeout tonight, 63. So Trayce Thompson, the only above average guy in this group over the last 2 weeks. He's well above average. The other guys are well below average. To me, Trayce Thompson, every single day, is in left field or center field. Then I keep going back and forth. I have Gallo moments, and then I'm off on Gallo. I think I'm landing on Taylor against lefties, Bellinger against righties, with Trayce Thompson alongside Cody Bellinger in left field when Bellinger's playing center and in center field when Chris Taylor's playing left. Are we in agreement on that one?
Yeah, I think so. And the only caveat that I'll add to that is potentially Taylor unseats Thompson if he puts together, a hot 2-week stretch to close the regular season. I think the Dodgers would roll with the experience and the quote unquote proverbial hot hand at that point. But yeah, I think Trayce has definitely done enough over a long enough period of time that he warrants, effectively being an everyday starter. And like you said, if Bellinger's in center field, then let Trayce play left. And if you're sitting Bellinger because the opposing team is starting a lefty, then put Thompson in center and put Chris Taylor in left field.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Matt wants to know what's happening with Bobby Miller. One of my bold predictions was that Miller would make an appearance. I think even a start, I said, in the postseason. That's going to be a wrong bold prediction. That's why those are bold predictions. He's in the minors. Not expected to be making an appearance, not even on the 40-man roster, but still developing, and hopefully for 2023, I would say is the headline there.
Yeah, I think he and some of the other prospects who have really been impacted by expanded rosters not being 40 players anymore. Because had that been the case, although this year maybe could have been challenging just because the Dodgers have had so many different guys on the 60-day IL that they then have needed to put back on the 40-man roster, but even that, had expanded rosters been at 40, how they used to under the old rules, maybe we would have seen Bobby Miller at some point this month.
Yeah. And people always asking us about James Outman, same boat. Like Miguel Vargas is the guy that they gave that spot to. Now, why they refused to play Miguel Vargas will always baffle me. Like he's there. These games don't matter. Let him play. Let him hit. They've clearly seen enough. And he hasn't performed, to be fair. It's not like he's earning these at-bats. And so if you had hope, like I did, that he might be able to get in there against lefties in the postseason, that's just not going to happen at the rate that things are going for him. And so I think they chose Vargas over Outman. They've already got 4 guys for 2 spots in the outfield. I don't think there was any chance that Outman was going to beat out Gallo or Taylor for a spot on the postseason roster. And so that's just the nature of what it is. Isaac wants to know, who are we rooting to play for? Who are we rooting for to play in the NLDS? Obviously, you're looking at, you've got the Mets, you've got the Braves, you've got the Cardinals, and then kind of whatever happens with the last couple of wild card spots. So any of those sort of, jump out at you, Matt?
Not too much. I mean, I guess, on one hand, maybe the Cardinals in some aspects appear to be the least imposing or daunting opponent. I think the Mets you probably would want to see last, just because in a short series, Scherzer and DeGrom could start 4 of those games potentially, or at least pitch in 4 of them in some capacity. But the Braves also, they just lost Ozzie Albies. And so I guess I haven't seen the timeline for him, but I think he fractured his pinky finger, right? Or something on his right hand the other night. So that's notable for them. I think above all else, if you're the Dodgers, you're just rooting for the NL East race to go down to the wire, just like the NL West did last year. And because we saw like what kind of toll that took, and then just let the chips fall however they may.
Yeah, the Phillies, the other team, by the way, the Phillies currently 2 games ahead of the of the Brewers for the final wild card spot. So the current wild card, you've got the Braves, the Padres, the Phillies, and then the Brewers are 2 games back. Obviously, the Braves are well ahead of the Phillies. So, you're just, and look, the NLDS, I've still got to get used to this new setup and who plays who and what seeds. I mean, people are looking, I'm like, well, they're not going to play the Mets, and they're probably not going to play the Braves, right? I mean, that's like, those are the 2 teams that you can pretty much cross off, or is there a chance they could play the Braves? Like, is there a chance they could play the second place, the number 1 wild card team?
Yeah, so I think I'd have to look at the bracket again, but there's a chance that they could play potentially one of the Mets or the Braves, because whoever doesn't win that division ends up in the wild card series. And I think right now they would be...
So they would be the winner. It looks like they'd be the winner. Okay. So they'd play the winner of the 4 versus the 5. But as you said, the number 4 team would be the top wild card team.
Right. So it could be, it probably will be one, either the Braves or the Mets.
Yeah. Woof. That would be brutal. That would be brutal. I mean, not that I don't think they could beat them. It's just you'd like to do better there.
I think, we had a comment in here that said something about DeGrom and Scherzer needing to pitch in the wild card too. That's a great point. So, that could impact their availability and how quickly they'd be able to pitch then against the Dodgers, especially if that wild card series goes all 3 games instead of 2. I mean, there's a ton of different variables and factors that it's tough to really say like who would be maybe a more favorable matchup, other than, like I said, I mean, I'll use Daniel's, no disrespect, but probably the Cardinals. Yeah,
there we go. One other thing, I just saw this from Fabian Ardaya on tonight's game. Justin Brule got quite the reception when he returned to the visiting clubhouse after his first big league save. He got into a cart as his teammates showered him in beer and ketchup. Joked that he couldn't open his eyes for a bit afterwards. So, beer and ketchup, Matt, how do you feel about that? Any opinions?
That's I feel bad for Brule. That doesn't sound pleasant. I mean, just do the beer and let him be.
Yeah, ketchup. Like, is somebody carrying around packets? Like, what do we have, a bottle? I mean, maybe I guess there's probably post-game food.
Yeah, it's probably my guess is it would be a bottle that they got from the food room, and then we're just,
That'd be aggressive if guys are, or maybe they're just chucking packets at him too. I mean, I wouldn't put it out of the, look, there's some guys you're worried about injuring for the postseason. I'm not sure Justin Brule's on that list. No disrespect to Justin Brule. All right, a couple more topics here. Let's talk Gavin Lux. This was one of the questions that we got. 17 games left in the season. As I said, there is 1 day off, but on Tuesday they've got a doubleheader. So 17 games in 17 days. He came back yesterday for his first appearance. He goes 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. He is out of the lineup tonight. How do you see them handling him? And are you writing his name in ink for the postseason starting spot at second base, or do you think he's got to prove a little bit that he's back?
I think he's going to have to prove a little bit, which is a little ironic because he needs to also play to sort of show. And I mean, it could be honestly one of those things where maybe they just didn't want him, his first game back after missing basically 2 weeks, they didn't want him to go back to back right away. So it could have just been ease him in, let him play Saturday night, rest him Sunday, and then starting Monday, maybe get him, a string of consecutive starts. But for multiple reasons, I think he needs to play the majority. I mean, if not every day, I would say when it's all said and done, he should probably have played 14 of the 17 remaining games. And that's to A, see what you're going to have in him, and B, also give him an opportunity to sort of find his swing again. I mean, he wasn't really doing anything for 2 weeks, and that's significant. You don't want to go into the playoffs with, Lux kind of, not sputtering, but maybe dealing with inconsistent playing time after missing, like I said, multiple weeks. And he, again, like I've referenced on some of our other videos, Lux has openly said his swing is very much predicated on timing and feel that he sort of, only can kind of get in game situations.
Yikes. It's not what you want to hear. I mean, a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? And I'm not trying to bring up the Austin Barnes conversation, so we'll set that one aside. But how confident are you that, 3 weeks from today, that we're just going to be penciling Gavin Lux into the lineup as the second baseman and feeling, reasonably good about that?
I think a 6 or 7. I mean, he's put together a strong season, and so I think he just needs a little bit of time.
Okay, so you're confident that the Gavin Lux we saw for the first 3 quarters of the season is a guy that we're going to be expecting to be in the postseason, 3 weeks from now?
Yes, it may not happen like game 1 of the NLDS,
sure,
but maybe at some point in the series, and if they were to advance, that yes, at some point in the playoffs, I think he would mirror the player that in the production that we've seen this year,
which is huge. I mean, I keep saying it, like he was a top 20 wins above replacement player in the National League prior to that injury, and so obviously, if you get a guy that can hit at the bottom of the lineup with the type of average that he was hitting at, he plays a reasonable, solid second base, and people always want to nitpick the guy and say, well, he's not very good at this, or, why isn't he doing this better? And it's like, who is he competing against? Somebody asked in the chat, like, will Mookie play second base? No, they need outfield. They don't have enough outfielders that you feel good about. It's not like they're looking for an opportunity to get Joey Gallo into the outfield. They're looking for an opportunity to keep Gallo or Cody Bellinger out. They just haven't found it because Chris Taylor has played as poorly as he is. And so Chris Taylor might be one of the best options in the outfield, but if you start comparing him to Gavin Lux, there's not even a conversation the way that those two guys have played this year, right? I mean, are we on the same page with that one?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think if anything, we may see, especially if it's a right-handed hitter, you put Muncy at second base. I mean, a right-handed pitcher, you put Muncy at second base, and then you figure out who your DH is at that point. I mean, I guess, like you said, maybe Gallo, or Bellinger, I don't know. You'd have to figure it out.
Yeah,
or, I mean, that could be for a game that Austin Barnes is starting behind the plate, and you let Will Smith DH.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how it shakes out. Is that if Gavin Lux isn't that guy, I think the guy to pick up that slack will be Austin Barnes, because as you said, Muncy plays second, Turner plays third, Will Smith DHs, and Austin Barnes behind the plate. So I think the most interesting thing will be if Gavin Lux returns to the guy who was hitting about 300, for two months ago. If that guy is playing in the postseason, how desperate are they to get Austin Barnes in? Because I just refuse to believe that Will Smith needs a day off in the postseason from behind the plate. And so it will only be based on we need to get Austin Barnes. We desperately want to. It's not like, okay, fine, Will Smith needs a day off. Will Smith does not need a freaking day off in the postseason, okay? And I'm not talking about he doesn't. His knees will be fine. He's a young dude. Guys used to play a bunch more games in a row. There's days off, NLCS even. He needs to play every single freaking day, and he can do it behind the plate. If Austin Barnes plays, it's not because Will Smith needs a day off. It's because they want to get him in, and that's going to be so intriguing for me to watch how desperate they are to do that, because if it comes at the expense of a 300 hitting Gavin Lux, woof. We're going to have some takes on this show, Matt. Let's put it that way.
I keep telling you, get ready for Austin Barnes to average 2 starts per postseason series. So it's coming.
The NLDS is 5 games. Maybe 5 games.
I know. I mean,
are you not going to go crazy if they're like, hey, Gavin, we know you're hitting 300, but sorry, tonight's an Austin Barnes night? That's not going to drive you through a wall?
I mean, I guess no, because I'm already expecting it. It won't be
okay.
surprising.
Take your expectation out.
I mean, it's tough to I can't necessarily do that.
It's going to drive me crazy. And Austin Barnes is playing incredibly well, so I guess that's the caveat, is that he actually is hitting really well right now. That's the outlier, if we're being honest here. But there you go. Yeah, somebody says against a lefty, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, maybe. Yeah. Look, none of this will shock me. It will make me frustrated, but it won't shock me. Okay.
People want to tune in for our live pregame shows.
Oh my gosh. Nights. Yes. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Okay. Playoff roster check-in. We did the outfield. Let's talk bullpen real quick. We've mentioned that there's kind of a group of 6 guys, Heaney, Price, Ferguson, Graterol, Canely, and Almonte, that depending on who's healthy, those 6 are probably competing for 3 spots. It's been an interesting week for those guys. You've got Heaney, who has his best performance in a few weeks, 8 strikeouts in 4 innings, doesn't give up the home run, as you indicate. Obviously, the Giants maybe not the most telling litmus test in the world. You got Tommy Kahnle, who comes back from injury, 2 appearances, 7 batters faced, 5 outs, 4 of them via strikeout, 1 walk, 1 hit by pitch, no hits. So I would say incredibly successful start to Tommy Kahnle's time as a Dodger in the back half. So where are you at? I mean, so Heaney, Price, Ferguson, Graterol, Kahnle, Almonte. I don't think I'm missing somebody in there. It feels like I'm missing somebody in there. But of those 6, where are you at today?
It's tough. I feel like this is just, a moving target no matter what day we sort of discuss it. And I think Gonsolin's availability and role will impact this as well. And to this point, like I said, there hasn't been any indication if the Dodgers view him as, we're going to use him as an opener to pitch the first 3 innings, or we're going to use him after an opener out of the bullpen. I will stir the pot a little bit and say Phil Bickford has put together 9 consecutive scoreless appearances through Sunday night. So does he if he keeps that up, does he potentially force his way into the picture as a right-hander? I think the easier
no is the answer to that question. And again, it's just because of the guys ahead of him. He would be on every other postseason roster in the league.
It's definitely fair. But I mean, like, what if Bickford keeps this up and Graterol struggles after coming back?
Graterol's off for me already.
Okay, so I don't necessarily. I think for me, Graterol's in. I think Price is somebody who's probably off.
Yeah, I think he's the easiest of the bunch to cross off of that list.
I think Ferguson could get squeezed out too.
He's been so good.
I think him and Vesia will end up being a toss-up. And I know Vesia didn't look good Saturday night, particularly again. I mean, he started off with the back-to-back walks, and then they left him
Sunday night.
Sunday night, yes, sorry. Then they left him in to face the run of righties.
But it was like his first time allowing a run in, like 20 appearances or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Heaney?
We'll see. So that's the thing. Like, does he even end up in the bullpen if Gonsolin isn't maybe starting? And for the NLDS, obviously it's a shorter series. You don't necessarily need as many starting pitchers, but you also will want somebody to sort of be a potential long reliever, right? Just if you need that kind of guy. Yeah. I mean, there's usually always the one. And so is that Heaney potentially an NLDS? I mean, we even talked about in our Gonsolin video, is he, and you brought it up earlier, on this show, is he potentially maybe not even put on the NLDS roster, which, yes, you don't want to take for granted that you're going to advance, but you also need to put kind of the pieces, however they fit best together for this. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a moving target. I think what I sort of keep coming back to is, for the most part, there aren't really any bad decisions and bad options for the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Yency Almonte, if he comes back and pitches well, like, that further complicates things.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we didn't mention Kahnle, who used to be a high leverage guy in big moments. Now that was a handful of years ago.
On. Yeah, I think he's on.
Okay, I mean, you just named like all of them and said, yeah, I like him. And you said Bickford too. Yeah, so you said Kahnle is on. You said Graterol is on. You only get 3 spots here. So then you've got Heaney. Okay, and so Ferguson you were out on. Price you were out on. So if Graterol and Kahnle are both on, you've got Almonte or Heaney or Bickford, apparently. Who gets your last spot?
The Bickford one was more of if he just keeps this up, because he had, like, his year big picture hasn't been great.
Okay.
But if I think he could be part of the conversation if he goes, scoreless throughout September.
Okay, so you've got Kahnle and Graterol. So Almonte or Heaney?
I think honestly,
or Ferguson.
It comes down to opponent. Okay. I think, and whatever they decide with Gonsolin, because we don't have any indication on what they're thinking with him.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. The Mets struggle against lefties, for example, so maybe a guy like Ferguson has a better chance. I think, yeah. I mean, look, you look at that list, and it's like, if Almonte's healthy, it feels like he's a shoo-in. If Kahnle's healthy, it feels like he's a shoo-in. And then Ferguson, like, you just look at his numbers, and you can't argue with them. And then that doesn't even include Heaney, who's got, one of the best strikeout rates in all of baseball. And if he's not giving up the home run, again, I keep saying it. His ability to strike guys out is the most valuable asset humanly possible in a playoff bullpen. Now, the home runs is whatever the opposite is, the most valuable, the least valuable, the most hurtful thing. So man, to me, Graterol, Canely, Ferguson, Almonte, and Heaney, those 5 guys for 3 spots is bonkers. And I'm with you. I'm warning people now. I think if Gonsolin is on the track and the trajectory he is currently on, I think there's a compelling case to be made to say, if he's not starting and giving you starter innings, let him rest, let him do his simulated games and get built up for when you need 5 starters. Because none of us would rather see Gonsolin in for 1 inning over any of the names I just mentioned, right?
Yeah, I think just not the only thing, but one potential hang up to that will be if that's the route that they go, if depending on when he potentially returns during the regular season, he could be going like 2 months with 1 major league game.
Yeah.
And so, do they want to do that where if they get to the NLCS and they say, okay, Gonsolin, like, yeah, you're built up now to give us 5 innings, but you haven't seen major league hitters in a real game since, September, whatever. Like that could be problematic.
Yeah. I'm going to take, just because I put you on the spot, somebody in here saying you want a 40-man roster in the postseason, which is amazing. It's like you love everybody. It's like, Bickford, don't cross him off. I think Almonte, if he's healthy. I've got Canely, Heaney and Heaney. Ferguson is so good. I just like, it hurts me to say that. And then I see him pitch and I'm like, you're such an idiot. Like even today I had a guy on Twitter arguing with me about Vesia against righties. And I was like, yeah, Vesia is going to pitch against lefties. He's like, no, he has great numbers against righties. And I was like, all right, well, they're way worse than his lefties. He's like, well, he's amazing against lefties. So I looked it up, like Dodger pitchers against right-handed. Ferguson's better than Vesia. Like, honestly, it's hard to make a Vesia is better than Ferguson case statistically this year. Like, there's not many numbers that would back that up other than strikeout rate.
And that could end up swinging things in favor of Ferguson, right? Because you don't in the playoffs, you don't want to get like now with a 3-batter rule, like you can't really afford to have a loogie guy on your roster because they're very specific scenarios where you need to bring him in. But again, I don't know. I mean, if Ferguson is just good against both splits, then he probably gets the nod.
Ferguson 1.61 ERA on the season. Vesia 2.22. Vesia's FIP is better, 2.18 to 2.50. Vesia's pitched 20 more innings, so he's well ahead of him in wins above replacement. Vesia, as I said, almost 13 strikeouts per 9. Ferguson is at 9. Walk rate's pretty similar, but man, I'm not arguing. Vesia is better than Ferguson. I'm putting into context. We're all writing Vesia's name in pen as he's a lock, and Ferguson isn't too far away from him in the statistical category there. So, all right, I think we covered it. Matt, am I missing anything? We got 17 days left. 8 games. What do we got? 8 games this week, right?
Yeah, something like that. I know there's a doubleheader at Dodger Stadium Tuesday, so
which you're fired up about. I know you're fired up about that one.
That'll be my first time covering a doubleheader in person, so we'll see how that goes.
We need what's the brunch situation? Can we get a breakdown on Twitter of the media room? Like, I'm assuming we're gonna have to do 3 meals that day at Dodger Stadium, so we need a full breakdown.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. They will serve. That is one good thing about like 110 starts on Sunday is they do breakfast. Which when I was there for the last Sunday game, I did see, I don't know if I brought it up here or in the watch party, I saw a reporter putting peanut butter on his waffles. It was the first time I've ever seen something like that. And I thought, man, like that is kind of strange.
Just plain peanut butter? Like, do you throw honey or syrup or something on top?
I think it might have had syrup also.
I mean, look, I'll say this. It's not the worst idea in the world. If I got an Eggo waffle and I'm trying to get a little protein in, a little peanut butter on a waffle, get a little honey, some syrup on there to kind of, mix that. It's not the worst thing. Are we talking like Belgian waffles? Like the big puffy ones?
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. I mean, look, I wouldn't do that in public. I mean, I'll be honest there. That's like me at home with an Eggo or something like that. But, yeah. Okay. Well, everybody in the comments is just talking about Juan Soto. So I think that's our cue to stop talking about waffles and peanut butter there. That's Matt Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. You can check out tons of content on DodgerBlue.com. As always, DodgerBlue1958 on social media. You can follow Matt there on Twitter, me as well. And if you are not yet, please subscribe, rate, review our podcasts. Even if you're not a podcast person, you could do us a solid. Go to Spotify, go to Apple, create some accounts, subscribe, rate, review, leave a comment. That's a huge help to us. Again, we're part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, which is a really cool deal. So we appreciate you joining us. Dodgers sweep the Giants. They've won 7 of their last 8. They have the best record in baseball. They're on pace for just under 113 wins, which would break the franchise record by 7. So lots to be excited about, Dodger fans. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be out with daily previews throughout the week. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the double. Do I have to do 2 Dodgers dailies on Tuesday? To be determined. Flaming hot betting picks, though. The people just want those, Matt. So we need to make sure we get them. We'll be back here Sunday night, next Sunday at 9 p.m. with another live show. So again, thank you for joining us. Enjoy your night. We'll see you next time.